Welcome to TradeTheMBI.com. This is John. This report is for the 30th of October, and the excitement is growing. We survived the October 29th date. However, we've been in pretty decent retrace coming back here as the reallocation. There was the set belief that the election was going a certain way. Then the narrative began to change a little bit, and to hedge their bets, we had some transitioning, which often leads to sell-off like things. Not to mention you get actual sell the news situation. Everyone was anticipating the giant GDP, and in fact it came through, so that had already been pre-factored, and you sell the news, and that's what we've been getting for the last several days. All in all, good stuff. Short-term buyers, at least we can see from the steel, have popped up a little bit, but still not seeing any sustained support. And I don't know that you're going to prior to the election, simply because that money is already allocated and in place, so it's just a question of they need to see confirmation. And if there's a clear delineation one way or another, then gosh, Monday we'll start to see it. But remember last 4 years ago, it was when the futures were down 1,000, and I said just buy buy it and just hold on for the ride. And look at where we are now. I mean, that was quite a while back, and for all the doom and gloom, none of it came true. It was all prosperity from there until the plague came in, and even still, it hasn't really been that deleterious, at least to the markets, notwithstanding what it's done to the global economy and the world in general. But those are different topics, unrelated to what we do from a trade standpoint. You can see from the NQ standpoint, still below the red line. So this is by no means have we turned any upside corner or anything like that yet. We just have short-term buyers maintaining the 23% at this particular point. But a dip back below the 23%, and I would definitely think that you got more downside to go. Euro's got plenty of downside left, plenty. We're just revisiting the lows that took place back here at the end of September. But anyone looking at the euro situation at this particular point and seeing any degree of positivity that justifies this, when you're looking at 30+% growth in the U.S., and you're looking at major contraction within the euro, doesn't take a genius to figure out where money's going to be traveling to, and it certainly isn't going to go to where you're locking down. It's going to go to where you're opening up. Now, that said, the U.S. has been inconsistent in its opening, because you have red states that are open and blue states that are closed, and until after the election. If that changes after the election, great, but that's the only thing keeping the euro even remotely in this territory. Otherwise, parity or less would be equivalent as far as economic output. And from a gold standpoint, again, until you see some type of reflationary setup, that isn't the case right now. If we can see stimulus starting to pop up, that would be one thing. Now, let's go back to the beginning of this day, because there was a lot going on, and it was a lot of volume going through here, and there were some key areas that we wanted to talk about. So we've been discussing this situation where you have this steel cross below cyan orange up, particularly in an area where you're not in a DSC spread. In this case, the DSC spread is where the cyan is below red and then comes above. I meant to say steel reset, which is where the steel comes below red from having been at the top. Now, right here, it hasn't been that long, but needless to say, the increased short clarification, no question about it. I mean, you already have green under red, but you can expect the acceleration right here when you get that crossover. That's exactly what happens. And of course, then you get the leg buy, which is obviously that orange dip below, and again, when that green crosses cyan, it sort of gives that confirmation. And I usually look at, you've got a bullish run, as long as that steel stays above until it crosses back below with the orange spike. Because you don't really get the orange spike as well as the steel being, crossed until right here. So it comes a little bit later, so you're getting the actual steels above, crosses below, orange below, crosses above both, and that actually turns into legitimate
order filled.
And so on the very next bar, you're like, oh my gosh, I'm here at 72, now we're at 76. And then, of course, 2 bars later, it all falls apart, and boom, you're all the way back down to the lows. This is a secondary configuration of it, a little bit further into it. So, same, identical, and you can just follow those. Now, what I'm also looking at, though, in that case, and becomes important, is, am I having the deterioration of the long-short algo? In this case, the magenta one, you're following 74.50. That's kind of flatlining. And then it goes to 74.75 right there. It's like right here, we start to see it begin to really fully break down. Likewise, I'm looking at the short algo, and it's flatlined as well. So those are where, you've got a neutral bias. I tend to be, if you've got a long signal on those and you have a continued rising DOC red, I'll stay with it to the upside. But in this case, you did not have the rising DOC red. It was neutral to flat here, as well as green popping back up and below. So that gives you a market that just is undecided as to its pressure dynamic. It was still generally bullish, so what they traded lower to see what supply was, and did the exact same thing again, pretty much almost identical level. That one took hold. Now I marked these with X's, and the clear reason why is just look at the angle of this short long algo, straight up. These aren't going anywhere. Now that doesn't mean you can't collect a few points off them if you want, or use it as an opportunity to re-enter from a long standpoint, but they're clearly not giving you that same representation. And it's important to note that, because there's a big differential between those two. And that's really what you have to be cognizant of. What I think I'm planning to do will be to alter colorations, where we'll go from brighter to neutral color, the gray when it's flat. So maybe have it more white leading up to a flat neutral. Likewise for the short algo, where maybe we start off with a lighter pinkish red, or maybe stay with the red, and then when we go into a flat zone, turn to the pink, and then when it's declining, the darker red, just to give it more accentuation. So just sort of like the same idea with the stoplight, green, yellow, and red sort of configuration. So once we maintain that, we created a few positive extremes. It was nothing to write home about. They came back and filled within this DOC spread that took place right over here, and that was pretty clean from that standpoint. And then as we got some of the border short ones, we ended up with the same turnaround signals. Boom. It's so many times repeated. It's just like I almost forget to mark them, because it's just like, okay, yeah, we look for that. The orange below, green crosses above, boom. You have your cyan, all right there. Just does it all at once. Of course, then you have obviously cyan below red, which is the blue candle anyway, which is always in a buy. And then, of course, you got way over the top here. Now, we created all these positive extremes, so we know that 32.97 is going to be the turnaround point. Once we start getting up to the peak here at 33.40, I now know that I got potentially upwards of 40 points built into my short setup. What we're looking at here with the steel so far below is equivalently it coming on the top. So as soon as you start to see weakness from a DOC red, and that could even be as early as you saw here at the 24 range, very aggressive would have been capturing the open of these bars when you start to see it declining. Of course, you've got pretty elevated magenta, and that's where seeing it start to fade, and that is why the signaling doesn't even show up until right here. You get a secondary version of it, and then it's just a matter of waiting, because a lot of times you can get that to return back towards the highs. For me, when I'm about to make an aggressive move like that, I'm looking for any pop I can get to add into it that's going to be between the 76 and the 100% Morganacci lines, just because it gives you a good range for a breakout above, and you can be just slightly above the highs on that one. And then coming back through, there it is. We just start to break down, where you end up with the orange boom, the whole crush. At this particular point, you can see the long short algo right here, just completely flat. And it's that flatness that allows for the capture of it. Coming back down, fill it exactly. Now that always usually creates a bump. And sure enough, in this particular case, and this is a nemesis situation where you have the right scenario, this is correct. There is nothing wrong with this from a long standpoint. It's doing all the things that you're looking for. Even the long short algo is pretty much just flat on all of them. So that doesn't give you any aid when you're at that, because you're saying, well, I'm in a neutral situation. The bias has generally been down. If you didn't already take it at the algo fill, you might be tempted to say, okay, no, now it's going to reverse, but immediately you get that spider. And there's just nothing you can do about those, because it looked like the bulls were trying to do it, and then short set, and then no, we're coming back at you, and they drove it back down to the new lows on that. And this is one I'm going to continue to work for, because we see it happen time and time again. A little bit different in this particular case, because it starts off right, and your long short algo start moving in the direction with it, as well as shakeout, as opposed to this configuration. So it's not just an arbitrary where you see the spider and it means that it's a short. No, because when that algo starts lifting, in this particular case, if the orange had not spiked back above the steel, this is what I'm looking at, this scenario right here, because in the uptick going there, you don't get that orange spike at all. And literally it happens like right here, but at that point you've already, it crossed below, there was no real activity because you couldn't get the orange to do anything, and it just came back down and reasserted another buy. And that's kind of where the configuration is. We're in a little bit of a DSC spread right here, but nothing too strident, just kind of blah. Now you got falling 100%, which is probably going to help hold things up a bit. So I thought that was good for us to go through those. Those are really excellent, and some of the modifications that I think that we can look forward to. I got my Isabella out of the hospital, so I can devote full resources to getting these things updated for the new month. So looking forward to it. As always, though, we will have renewals sent out so that you'll be able to take care of it for the weekend, and we'll be all set to start the new month, and really going to be a raucous beginning to November. No question about that. As always, trade well. We'll talk again later.